asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, Jesus said. But this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. The day is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Now don't get your expectations up too high, because we are never going to perfectly understand all the different aspects of suffering. There is a certain mysteriousness to this way that God works in human life. And there are going to be moments, there are going to be times, there are going to be periods when you're going to ask, Lord, what in the world are you doing? And it's going to seem like he's silent. And maybe years will pass, and you'll never quite understand why. But we do have to be a little humble in this whole matter, because we are limited. We're limited by our understanding of the past. We're limited by our total unknowing of what the future is going to bring. And we're limited by the fact that we can know what's going on inside us, but we don't know what's going on inside of other people. So at times we do have to just bow our heads before the Lord and say, Lord, I trust you, even though I don't understand you. What we do find, though, from the biblical principles on suffering is we find the foundation, we find the structure on which to have that kind of trust. And that's what we're going to look at this morning. Somebody once said that when you're suffering, just a dash of courage outweighs all the book learning in the world. Isn't that true? Just a little bit of courage. But it's the principles from God's Word that opens us up to that courage that God is going to work in. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at some of the questions that we all have, why those questions need to be answered, and then what the biblical answers are. That's kind of interesting. The Bible doesn't sugarcoat life. And that is so important. It doesn't avoid the big questions. I think the disciples were just like us. You know, Jesus has been healing all sorts of people. They've been talking about all these profound subjects, and they come across this man born blind. And the first question out of their mind, out of their mouths, is the same question we'd ask. Why? Why was he born blind? What did he do wrong? And isn't that very human too? Don't we like to categorize evil like that? We like to say, well, you know, this happened to him because he did that, right? And it's very convenient. It's very clean, right? If you don't do anything really bad, then nothing really bad is ever going to happen to you. Of course, that's not true, is it? And that's where the questions come in. There's all sorts of physical suffering. And we go back to Haiti. We wonder, what in the world? Why did God allow an earthquake of that proportion to hit a country with an infrastructure so ill-prepared? What did the children do that they deserved to go to school, eager to learn, eager to get out of the house and go somewhere, and only to have their school crumble on top of them? Why? And we wonder. We wonder about injustice, don't we? Even a person who doesn't have any kind of relationship with God has that inbuilt sense of justice that if you do the right thing, you get rewarded, and you don't do the right thing, you get punished, right? That's just the way it ought to be, but the truth is, it isn't that way. Book of Job, you have the reference in chapter 21, kind of interesting. You remember Job. Now, he was a guy that did the right thing most of the time. In fact, God said to Satan, look around the earth. Have you seen anybody like my Job? And God says, well, let me take some things from him, and then we'll see how loyal he is to you. So God says, okay, have Adam, and he just takes everything away from him. Well, Job has these three great friends. And they come and they visit him and they point the finger at him. They say, Job, it's time for you to expose your secrets. It's time for you to let us know what the dark side of your life is, because there's no way that all these bad things would happen to you unless you had a dark side to you. And in the verses that are listed there in your outline, Job says, come on, stop the cliches, guys. Stop this thing of, that whenever you do something bad, then something bad happens to you, and that's just the way it goes. Job says, I've been around long enough, and I've seen it happen where good people end up on the short end of the stick, and people who don't have any regard for morals, for God, or for good succeed. They're popular, they're well paid, they're healthy, and some of them even go to the grave that way. He says, it's not that simple. And you know it's true, don't you? You might have even experienced it in your life, where the bad guys got away with the bad stuff. And then, of course, there's the question, when suffering hits us. It's one thing to be an observer of suffering, isn't it? You can be pretty intellectual about it. You can say, well, yes, I can see how these things can, build a person up and so on. But boy, when the pain hits home, it's a whole other matter, right? You never become an expert in pain until you've actually felt it in the skin. And what's the first thing we ask when we feel pain? Isn't it why? Why, God? What did I do to deserve this? What are you trying to tell me? Or sometimes it's anger. God, this just doesn't fit into my plans. Who do you think you are upsetting the apple cart like this? So the questions are out there. And the questions aren't just hypothetical. They're just not philosophical. They're not the kind of things we only think about in Philosophy 101. This is real life stuff. Because how we answer these questions about suffering are going to determine the way our lives go. Suffering can be so devastating that it buries a person in absolute despair. I'll bet you know somebody that's gone through a horrible situation in life and they never recover from it. Maybe you've even had a situation where you look back on the suffering and you say, hey, I don't want to go through this again. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. I didn't enjoy it, but I did grow through it. Some good things happened from it. And then there's probably some other times you look back on suffering and you say, oh boy, I'd like to be able to do that one over. So it matters tremendously how we answer the questions about suffering so that we're able to deal with suffering in a way that's we're going to overcome and not be overcome by suffering. But there's more than that. If you're not suffering right now, I guarantee you probably somebody very close to you today, right now, sitting in this room, is suffering. And the question is what is our responsibility to people who are suffering all around us? Now, it's easy to be pretty self-centered that way, isn't it? To say that's their problem, right? It's easy to be a friend to somebody who's prospering, right? It's all party. But what about somebody who's suffering? That's a whole other thing. You find out who your friends are when you start suffering, right? They disappear. Why do they disappear? Because you can't give them anything. We all do. When we're suffering, we become leeches because we need strength. We need help. We need support. But boy, that costs. And when we see somebody suffering,